Welcome to Board Game Animal. My name is Justin. This video has been a long time coming and has been in a bit of a development hack for a while. Months ago, we recorded the video only to have the files corrupted. This put a huge damper on my plans, and then because of bouts of sickness and delays, it took a little while to get to where we are now. That being said, we hope the video is worth the wait, so let's get right to it. I am a big fan of Brotherwise games, John D. Clare's games, and deck building games. So when I first heard that Mistborn The Deckbuilding game was coming from said designer and publisher, I was extremely intrigued at what that held in store. The only problem is that I've never read a single word of Sanderson's work, so that kind of put me in a weird spot, I guess. And, if only I had a massive Sanderson fan in my life who was also my best friend and a part of my game group.
Welcome to Board Game Animal. My name is Michael. I'm a behind-the-scenes player here at the channel, who's made a cameo here and there.
So Michael's here to help us talk about a few things, but especially the theme, and offer his perspective on it as a massive Sanderson fan first, and I'll talk a bit about the mechanics. And we're used to a lot of really generic theming in the hobby. And since the first time I saw the game and saw some of the components, and especially when I got my hands on it in person, I noticed that regardless of if you know anything about the source material, it's extremely evident that this is a pre-existing world. This isn't Generia here. You can tell that this comes from somewhere rich with lore, but without being a hindrance to someone who's unfamiliar.
Every card and component is there for some thematic reason. There's so much. Each card I can think of some moment from the source material, including specific moments from the books. You can tell from the get-go that this isn't just a run-of-the-mill sci-fi fantasy game filled with generic tropes.
I think that a lot of thoroughness went into the production, and again, that's evident from someone who knows nothing about the source material. I think you can tell that this isn't just an IP that's splattered on to some generic game or rule set. One thing I noticed from the get-go, simply reading the rule book, is the extreme attention to detail on the different metals that you use in the game, and that there seems to be some significance behind each one.
Many of the metals are thematically appropriate, essentially a one-to-one on what they do in the game versus what they do in the books. Of course, some are abstracted, but it's done well to make the game itself work. Even the things that are abstracted, you can kind of rationalize it. It's not just tacked on to force something to work. Everything ultimately makes sense from the perspective of how the world in the books works. The rule book lays the metals out nicely and breaks down how the pairs of metals work in conjunction with each other and how they're implemented in the game. For instance, tin being related to your senses, it makes sense that you'd be able to earn more coins. It's a pretty good allegory, I think. Pewter would kind of like make you more sturdy in the lore, so affecting your combative ability and your healing. It's what all happened in the books. It absolutely makes sense. One-to-one again.
And even without having any knowledge of that world that this all comes from, it's really abundantly clear that nothing in the execution is forced just to make it work. Or for lack of a better term, that it's just going to be some merch for the brand.
I feel like there was a lot of tender love and care put into the making of this game. I feel like the folks behind this really cared about what they were making. I find that abundantly clear. On top of that, I love the production. The double-layer player board is great. The quality of the cards and the components. I feel like the level of care that went into the application of the source material also went into the production. So I like everything about it. I know not all Sanderson fans are also board game fans, but I think this would look really nice on a Sander shelf. Something I think it's important to note is that this isn't necessarily the type of game I would introduce as like an entry point to the board game hobby to people who aren't already inside of it. But I do also feel like the fans of Brandon Sanderson and his writings, I think they would get into it pretty quickly, and I think they'd have an easier time.
With the passion said fans have, you may be a bit inclined or more predisposed to learning a game like this.
If you can process all the intricacy to the lore of Brandon Sanderson's books, you'll have an advantage trying to play this game.
And now let's talk about the gameplay experience itself. I don't think that there's too much that's revolutionary, per se, when it comes to the deck building. But the way all of the mechanisms come together are rather exquisite. Because in one package here, you have deck building, you have moving up on tracks, you have combat, and it's all especially balanced and easy to parse despite having a lot of moving parts. One of the biggest things that stands out to me right from the start is that technically you have 10 currencies that you're working with in this game. and yet somehow it's neither a bore to play or, more surprisingly, to teach.
I don't really find it overwhelming. You can only use it to flare it, and you think it should be overwhelming, but it's really not.
You try to lean into some of the metal use so you have enough cards to play off combos while also trying to diversify. It's incredibly clever with boatloads of options without having overhead. And when you teach this game, I don't think you're going to go through at the beginning and say, uh, at least I didn't, and go through and say, oh, this metal does this and this metal does that.
That's not something you explain first. Part of that is how well I find the cards to be written. They're not super wordy, filled with text like some cards can kind of get. There's an ease to the symbology. It's intuitive to anyone who's ever played any game, board, video, or otherwise. Green cross means health, cross swords are attacking, coins are money. It all falls into place.
Additionally, I love multiple win conditions in games, and the three in this one feel exceptionally different and all satisfying in their own ways. Especially with the shoot for the moon instant win card situation. It's one of those things that is such a cool achievement. It doesn't matter who managed to pull it off, that if someone does, the whole table is going to be cheering for them. One thing that I noted that Michael didn't get a chance to play, but I did, is the solo mode. I think the solo mode is pretty challenging. And I'm not sure if I personally care for the scaling from solo to cooperative and how they differ. I prefer it just solo. If I'm going to play with multiple people, I would prefer to play the competitive version. But that being said, I really enjoyed the solo experience in and of itself, just as a straight boss battler, essentially. I think it's an incredibly easy to run system. And that being said, for games that are primarily multiplayer that also have a solo option, I think that Mistborn does one of the best examples of streamlining the process. You're not going to be caught up with tons of overhead or bookkeeping while running the solo mode. It's a smooth experience. And I think what's great is that to make the smooth experience ever expandable, that when people are bringing up ideas of more content or future installments for this game, I personally would love to see the solo mode expounded upon especially. And I know Michael has a bit to say about what potentially could come down the line.
Future of the books past the events of this book, there's a lot of potential to fill more of this box, or where we get a couple more boxes.
Ultimately, I'm coming down at an 8.5.
I personally give this one a 9.5. There's more elements of the lore I would like to see added to the experience, but I'm sure that would round it out for me. As a fan of deck building games generally, and definitely the source material, you could say I had high expectations going in, and I would absolutely tell you if I was disappointed. Consider my expectations met and wildly exceeded.
And this is why I wanted to include Michael's take on this in the video, because I didn't want to leave out a major perspective on this game that I wouldn't be able to do justice to on my own. I'm looking at it from a game perspective, but looking at it from a game perspective and a fan of the source material, I think speaks volumes.
That's a hearty recommendation from Board Game Animal from the perspective of both mechanisms and themes. I can't wait to see what's in store for the future, not just for this game, with possible additions and things, but a certain RPG I've heard about too.
Yeah, he may have backed pretty much everything. Thank you so much to Brotherwise Games for the review copy and for being a friend of Board Game Animal.
Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing. And don't forget to play board games like an animal. Hey Lefty, what did you think of the game?
Oh, well, it's not really one for me. I'm not the biggest fan of abstract strategy, trick taking, heavy Euro Ameritrash, betting and bluffing, auction games.
You you didn't you didn't play the game. You didn't play the game. He didn't play the game.
He wanted to be in the review. I told him he had to play it, but he just didn't. He jumped on the table when I was playing it, and Brotherwise saw it, and but he's not good at the follow through. They tell me you want to be in a review, you got to play the game.
Yeah.
And he has thumbs.
He does have thumbs.
He could hold the cards.
I've seen him.
Yeah.
He's good at it. You wouldn't expect that of a cat, but he's got thumbs. What do you want?